Hi guys, it's me again. I know it's been a long time since I've uploaded a video to YouTube, but you know, okay, I won't lie, it's not just real life stuff, it's also been like procrastination and getting easily distracted and doing other stuff. But I'm gonna try to now to focus on making more content, but in a more sort of relaxed and less difficult way. I'm still probably gonna make some like fully edited essay videos on stuff like Kingdom Hearts or other stuff I like, but those stuff are definitely not going to come out faster. Whereas this podcast, hopefully, this new project will be able to get out faster. So what this is going to be a series of podcasting detailing my experience and thoughts as I replay Kingdom Hearts 1. And I'm planning to do this for the other Kingdom Hearts games as well, as well as other games I like, just sort of like talk about my experiences as I play through the games. Originally what I was going to do was going to do a full podcast on the whole game after I finished replaying it, but replaying Kingdom Hearts 1 is taking much more time than I thought it would, basically because of work, but also because again, procrastination, all sorts of human flaw stuff. So what this is going to be is this video specifically is going to be talking about my experiences from the beginning of the game all the way to Station Awakening to the end of Deep Jungle. Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and it's time to get on to the serious stuff. So, one of the first things I noticed with the OP that I didn't notice before is that basically Sora shows up on land, in the sea, and in the sky on this OP. Like it starts off he's on the beach, he's on land, and later he gets swept away into the ocean, and then at the end of it he's falling from the sky. Now it's important that these now what's important about that is basically like land, sea, and sky is a recurring motif in Kingdom Hearts. Specifically, Sora is named after sky, Kairi is named after the ocean, and Riku is named after land. And Destiny Island itself is a world in which the land, sea, and sky all exist in harmony because it's where Sora, Kairi, and Riku live together in peace. So I really like that that motif is like also occurring in the OP itself too. Um, Another thing I sort of liked about the OP opening video is that it really does do a good way of recreating that sort of like that dream-like imagery, that sense of like the way that Sora's put in all these weird situations in the OP, but he doesn't seem to question it. Like he just goes into the ocean, like he chases after Riku into the ocean, he gets swept away in the currents, and he goes back on land and he doesn't even think about a second. It's sort of like that logic in dreams in which weird stuff happens, but you sort of just take it as the norm. So I always thought that was really cool because like one thing I really like about the openings of one, two, and three is, well, I don't know if three isn't exactly a dream, but well, there is definitely some implication that three's opening is a dream, but Kingdom Hearts 1 and Kingdom Hearts 2 opening make it pretty blatantly state in the games themselves that these openings themselves are dreams. And basically the opening Kingdom Hearts 1 is basically like the opening, video is like Sora having this dream that's like foreshadowing later events in the game. Like now I'll probably explain what this they're foreshadowing explain later. But once at the Station of Awakening, what I did is I decided to pick the same stuff I picked from my first playthrough, which was I choose the power of the Guardian and I get rid of this and I sacrifice the sword. And I did this on my first playthrough for two reasons. One, I felt that it fit Sora's character the most because the shield's description specifically like points out the fact that it's all based around like defending those around you. And Sora's whole deal is that he wants to protect his friends. He fights for his friends. So I figured that fits Sora the most. And also again, and I also picked the shield because it's the one that gives you like Leaf Bracer the earliest in the game, and Leaf Bracer was an ability that I really wanted to get on my first playthrough soon because being able to be like being not getting hurt while healing yourself with cure is like a super helpful ability. And I gave up the sword because I felt like that was the one that fit Sora's character the least. Because like out of all the weapon description, the sword itself feels like it's the one with the most negative connotation. Like it's less about like the sword itself is more about like strength itself, but it's also sort of like it highlights the fact that it can just harm all those around you. And I also got rid of the sword because like when I first played Kingdom Hearts 1, I wanted to like I thought I didn't want to lose magic because magic seemed like it was really cool. So I figured the sword would be like the most for your strategy. I recall as a kid this might have made my first playthrough more difficult because sword just didn't do enough damage and I didn't know how to use the magic well enough to use it. I wasn't smart enough to use the magic well, so I'd usually rely on just the normal attacks and it felt like the normal attacks weren't doing enough damage. So when I did a second playthrough, I picked the shield but got rid of the sacrifice the wand, And I remember that second playthrough being easier, but that was also probably the fact that I was replaying the game. Because KH1, I feel like is a lot more difficult on a first playthrough than a later playthrough, due to like because one problem I feel like that Kingdom Hearts 1 has as well. I think it has a lot of interesting like ways it does its levels. It's also like very obtuse, and there's a lot of stuff where it's very difficult to figure out where the game wants you to go next. So it's easy to get lost or easy to waste time, which makes sort of elements of Kingdom Hearts 1 more difficult. But yeah, for this replay through, I wanted to sort of like pick the same stuff I had to pick beforehand. So pick the shield, gave up the sword. And one thing I find very interesting about this section is like the descriptions for the sword, the shield, and the wand is they've all got a positive one description, but also a negative one. And what I also find is interesting, I feel like the descriptions of all these things can also be applied to the Keyblade itself. Like the one itself is described as an object of wonder and destruction, which again fits the Keyblade because the Keyblade itself has these wonderful powers it can do, but it also imposes a threat to the world themselves. Because like they highlight later in the game that like the Keyblade wielders themselves can bring disasters to the world they visit. Yeah, but the sword, I feel one thing I also know is the shield description feels the most positive because like the power to protect all you care for, but is the positive one. And the negative description saying along the lines of repel all those around you. So Slayer like gives you the power to protect what matters, but it also comes with the risk of the possibility that those around you can be sort of repelled, which also fits the Keyblade because the Keyblade again it has the power to let you protect everything you care about, but there's also the threat that we see in the game that sort of the Keyblade itself causes conflict between friends, which yeah, both Kingdom Hearts 1 and both BVS had this thing where like a Keyblade can end up making can bring conflict to a relationship because there's elements of like jealousy and wanting that power. So there is that way, but also because the Heartless are attracted to Keyblade wielders as a threat that also endangers those around them, which is interesting. But yeah, its description definitely felt a bit more positive because out of all the ones, it's the one that puts the most emphasis on like protecting us around. Whereas the shield, it puts this positive description is like the courage to defeat your foes. Like it very much the sword itself feels like it puts strength power the most. It's less about protection, more like the ideal power and how that power allows you to do what you want in the face of the impossible, which is a positive thing. But the sword itself also brings up how destructive and how dangerous this is, which again also fits the Keyblade, where it's this weapon that can change the world itself around him, but it also has the power to destroy everything. Because really the Keyblade itself is arguably as dangerous, if not more dangerous than the Heartless themselves, depending on who the wielder is. So I definitely feel like one thing I'm interested about again, like all these weapons, all descriptions, they don't just fit the selected weapons you pick; they also fit the Keyblade too. But yeah, I do think even though I thought the shield is the one that fits Sora's character the best, I believe the canon weapon he picks according to like those like videos and stuff is the sword. Like there's later material that sort of implied the sword picked the sword, which does make sense because like the sword represents the Keyblade, the shield's Goofy, the wand is Donald. So of course the sword is the Keyblade when he's the one with the sword, the sword makes the most sense. Though I also kind of wonder like what I'm guessing because I think the Station Awakening is something that all Keyblade wielders probably go through at some point. It's never full. I think that's like implied, but it's never straight up said in any of the games. Maybe supplementary appeal goes in more depth about the Station Awakening. Who knows? Maybe it's just something unique to Sora. But I feel like Riku probably had his own experience with Station Awakening. I definitely think he would have picked the sword, but and maybe get rid of. I don't know if he would get rid of the magic. Maybe he would have gotten rid of the shield because like Riku at this point in the game has sort of like abandoned his true ideals for a list of power. But that's something to get more in depth in BVS because BVS is when they really like explore that idea that Riku in Kingdom Hearts 1 has sort of like changed and sort of rotted away from his true self we see him be birthed by sleep. Yeah, another thing I really like about the Station of Awakening is that the first like the Station Awakenings they all take place on these stained glass windows, like they're on these pillars. And like the first one we see in the whole series is Snow White, which is very fitting because Snow White was the very first Disney movie and the very first Disney princess. But it's also cool because later on context because Sora himself and his other selves like Roxas and Ventus, the other Soras, all draw heavy parallels to Snow White specifically because they're all heavily associated with like sleep and dreams, and Snow White herself is well known for like falling into the magical sleep after biting the poison apple. she's like, and the games themselves definitely draw this parallel later on, especially in later games, with how often Sora, Ventus, and and Roxas fall asleep. And with Ventus, they lay the parallels pretty heavily on, though I'll get more in depth on it when I eventually talk about Birth by Sleep. But yeah, I really like it, and I wonder what came first. Like I wonder what was the first idea. Like if they've always planned a parallel of Sora with Snow White because of sleep, but also because she's the first Disney princess. Like I'm kind of wondering, like what was the thought process when they came up with the idea? Was this just something that they delved into more later on? It was more coincident at first, or is this something they like planned out from the beginning? Because like Sora himself, even the first game, is like heavily associated with sleep. Again, like the opening section, this section, Station Waking, is all a dream Sora has, and then he wakes up on Destiny Island. And like later games also heavily so like Sora himself is very much associated with sleep and dreams. And I feel like they probably did that because they wanted to draw parallels between Sora and the first Disney princess. Again, maybe I'm just making assumptions, but that's sort of what I get. And I think it's like a really, really cool idea. That like, there's a lot of like good stuff. There's a lot of parallels between like the Cage characters and Disney characters. Like everybody knows how Sora's first outfit in Cage One is like based on Mickey, and it's very obvious based on Sora's placement within the Half Pint Trio that he is the Mickey stand-in for the group, which is like. It's really cool. There's like I always love it when Kingdom Hearts does parallels between the original characters and Disney characters, because like Cage is at its core a fairy tale, so it does borrow a lot of the same tropes that Disney does, but I also feel like it does that because, again, it is a Disney game, and so they're sort of invoking these themes with the characters in the game. Yeah, I'm into another part. Something else I always like about the Station Awakening is like the dubs is that like the station. Okay, hang on, sorry. Let me start over. The Station Awakening is described as this world surrounded by darkness, with pillars of light in the form of the actual station, their glass windows. But also, again, when Sora first gets there, it's like pitch black, and then the lights is revealed as the doves themselves fly out. So sort of like it's sort of this representation. I feel like the Station Awakening best represents it is a representation of the light in a person's heart that never goes out no matter how powerful the darkness gets. Which again, though, this is probably more speculation and assumption than saying the. Well, I don't want to say the devs didn't intend this. Like, I definitely get the feeling this is something Nomura and some of the people were sort of thinking of. Probably not as in depth as I'm thinking of as this. Oh yeah, and I said this earlier, but like the staff's negative description of a staff of Wonder of Ruin is also a reference to Keyblade itself. Sorry, I'm sorry for the stammering. I'm repeating myself again. Anyway, um, let's see. Now I already talked about Snow White. Okay, let's see. No, it's okay. Oh yeah. So something I also know. So before the section in which you talk to like these visions of Selfie, Tidus, and Waka to ask those questions and stuff, is that like you see the stained glass window and it's of a faceless princess. You see three faceless princess, and you see like the stained glass window basically like one's looking at the sun, another one's looking at the moon, and then above both of them is a princess who is like in the middle facing forward. And so like and later when you ask those questions, and because the point of the questions is to set up how like you level up, they're all described as something like midway, daybreak, nightfall, like sort of these ideas of like the sun rising, the moon lowering, or like just the middle way. And so the princes themselves are basically like that stained glass window is sort of foreshadowing that element before you do in the conversation, which I think is like really cool. And like so like one thing I really like about like the questions and the answers that the characters get this so you can give is they're very childish. Like the fear of growing up, being afraid of growing up, wanting to expand your horizons, wanting to be the best, and like be or worrying about being indecisive. These are all very much answers children would do. But I also think it's interesting because while these questions sort of can all be well, these answers can be applied to source characters. I also feel like a lot of them can also be applied to Riku, especially the wanting to be best. Because like at this state of character in his character, Riku himself is someone who is very much has a lust for power and this desire to stay on top. And like we don't get the series goes on later, but that's sort of like this is sort of a corruption of like what Riku's true ideals are. This idea that Riku is like because KH1 it's very much implied in KH1, but later games sort of like make it more obvious is that Riku in KH1 is sort of like fallen is his true ideals at the beginning of the game are being degraded by his own immaturity and his own selfish sides, which is like really cool. I also think some of these answers can also be representative of Kyrie too. Like I don't know. I'd have to check to see what all the answers are again, but I definitely think one could make an argument about each answer being meant for to represent a different character. Um, one thing I also thought was interesting is that the battle music plays for the first time at Aurora Sascalindo, which is surrounded by thorns, Maleficent's thorn. So the stained glass window stuff already has this idea of like dark of danger looking at the problem. So that being the first time we see the first on battle theme in the game, it's like it's very cool, cool. And like one thing I've noticed that's also cool about the opening is the fight with Darkseid. Is that like is that Sora technically doesn't defeat Darkseid. Like Sora ends up getting swallowed by the darkness that's created. We don't actually see Sora defeat it until later, which I think is like cool. Sort of this idea that this giant imposing monster for Sora isn't quite ready to defeat. But also another thing I love is sort of the line right before you fight the Darkseid, where the mysterious voice, which Noir himself later confirmed was Mickey, says that the closer you get to light, the greater your shadow grows. And then we see Sora's shadow grow and it morphs into the Heartless. But Sora puts this recurring idea through the series that being obsessed with light, constantly chasing after the light and lusting for it, only causes the hearts within you to grow stronger. I mean, which only causes the darkness in you to go stronger. It's not just this idea that with more light there creates more darkness, but more like if you desire the light too much, if you chase after it, if you lust it, if you like if if you chase after this pure, almost divine power, if you crave it for yourself too selfishly, darkness will only grow within you, and you in turn will become the opposite of that which you desire, which is like really cool. And later stuff delves into that more, like Birth by Sleep with Ericus. Very much, he's sort of like a perfect example of that. Someone being so obsessed with the light that the darkness within them only grows stronger. And of course, like Union Cross, the Keyblade War. Like that's sort of like what the conflict is all about. These people fighting over the light, only for it to create so much darkness that destroys the world. But yeah, probably talking too much about later games. Another thing I really cool was Mickey's line about how Sora is the one that will open the door, which is a recurring motif with Sora's character throughout the games. Because again, like a lot of the boss fights in Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2, the final bosses right before them, there's a door you have to open to it. But there's also references like door imagery shows up a lot in the final games. But then there's also stuff like in Kingdom Hearts 2, it's Sora's heart that opens the door to light, door to the realm of light. And then Kingdom Hearts 3, in the opening, we see Sora piercing through the darkness to create literal doors of light to save everyone. And sort of like the idea of Sora being the one to open the door is sort of this reference to the fact that like Sora is the one who saves people. He's the one who will open the door and save everyone, which I think is cool. I don't know if we've ever got. I don't think we'll ever get a full explanation about why exactly Mickey was talking to Sora or how exactly Mickey knew this. But like it's maybe we'll get a full explanation of this later, and I definitely expect something. I don't think it's not too far to think that because Nomura does like do this thing where like he'll take a vague plot point later and then give it a massive explanation later. It's like that's definitely we've seen Kingdom Hearts or like stuff like Nomura definitely is the type of person who like doesn't leave things unexplained. He doesn't give all the answers right away, but he does plan to give them eventually, and they make a lot of sense later. But yeah, okay, that's it for like the Station Awakening section, which I think is probably my favorite part of Kingdom Hearts opening, the Station Awakening, because while I think the stuff on Destiny Island is cool, it definitely doesn't have the same impact of Station Awakening with like with the with the with the stay playing, the almost religious imagery, the stained glass windows are just it's like it's your first it's like Station Awakening is like the perfect taste of like what Kingdom Hearts is all about, the the powerful striking imagery, the themes of light versus darkness, the almost I'm not gonna say gothic because gothic is the wrong term for it, but like this epic, almost church like not this epic music that feels like beyond something, not just something you see in a fantasy, but something you see in like a both a fantastical but a cosmic epic is the best way I think to describe it. There's vague religious church scenes. There's like There's like that strange gothic emo 2000s energy, all that sort of stuff. That all those everything that you sort of like imagine about what you like about KH is sort of like distilled. I mean, yeah, I think distilled's the right word. It's all like it's all here in the Station Awakening segment. That's sort of just like what makes it such a cool opening, and why I feel like the stuff on Destiny Island, while it is important for characters, doesn't quite hit as well as the Station Awakening stuff. Which is also why I don't quite like its opening as much as like later games openings, because I feel like they're able to hold on to that like KH energy more. Like I'd say it probably like Kingdom Hearts One's opening a little bit more than Birth by Sleeps because of the Station Awakening, but like the Destiny Island stuff only just drag a bit. So I don't think its opening is as strong as Kingdom Hearts 2's, which Kingdom Hearts 2's opening is just like pure Kino. It's like pure video game. It's just like probably one of the best openings you will ever find in a video game. And Kingdom Hearts 3's opening is also like really good. Like I really like how again it's return to that Station Awakening stuff. It also feels it really just captured that mysterious feel that Kingdom Hearts 1 had. Like it's very much referencing back to Kingdom Hearts 1's opening, but like there's foreshadowings just up to the ending of threes, and it's like there's new mystery they sort of introduce, and they also keep the same bizarreness because there's also like a lot of stuff about the Station Awakening section in Kingdom Hearts 3 that isn't exactly explained. But yeah, okay, next it's time to talk about the Destiny Island section. So one of the first interesting things that I sorry about the mumblings. Gotta fix that. Okay. Let's get back to serious stuff. Okay. So one of the first things that I think is very interesting about Disney Islands is that Sora specifically wakes up to Kairi, which is something that happens again later in the games, which I'll get into more of that. But like, it is very interesting that one of the very first characters that Sora sees, not counting the OP opening, is Kairi. Like it's the first person Sora sees outside of his dreams in the real world. It's Kairi, and that she is also one of the first characters in Kingdom Hearts that we hear actually speaking. Like this part where, because like at the beginning of the game there is no speaking, but like when Sora wakes up from his dreams and sees Kairi, that's the first time we see like actual characters talking, and so that makes the very first voices of Kingdom Hearts Sora and Kairi, which I think is interesting because their relationship is like very pivotal to like the numbered games. Like one could make us like the endings of each number game all revolves around their relationship, and it's Sora himself even later says that his entire journey has been about trying to find Kairi, which I really like. It all started with, and so because like Kingdom Hearts is at its very core a fairy tale, and Sora and Kairi's relationship is the most well known and classic of fairy tales, that of Prince Charming saving the princess, or not necessarily. It doesn't even necessarily have to be Prince Charming, but like the hero saving the princess. That's very much, and that's a recurring thing in every numbered KH games. And so I think it's very important that the first voices we hear in Kingdom Hearts are Sora and Kairi. Next up, one thing I also thought was interesting is about the outfits is that we both see Sora and Kairi wearing necklaces. Sora is of course wearing a crown necklace, because once which is again meant to evoke the idea of Kingdom Hearts. Like, the crown is over the heart, even though the heart's technically not in the chest. It's more like on the left side, not the center. But like we sort of attribute the idea of the heart in the center. So sort of the idea of the crown is above the heart, Kingdom Hearts. And like one could also speculate, it also associates Sora with the imagery of kings, which is something definitely intentional, even though it's not stated. Sora's character we described as a man worthy of being king. But Kyrie, she's got like one of those a simple necklace of like I think it's like sort of this white jewel, very simple. But yeah, the necklace itself has more importance later as we reveal in BB Birth by Sleep. But like the way it looks in Kingdom Hearts 1 is sort of like it kind of looks like a raindrop, so sort of evokes that slight images of like because it's like sort of white, it sort of got the imagery of light, but it's also that idea of water. So it associates us with water because Kyrie's name means ocean, but it also associates us with light, which is foreshadowing for Kyrie herself being a princess part. Whereas Riku doesn't have a necklace, but instead one thing that's interesting about Riku's outfit is he's got the big black X over it, which of course I'm definitely thinking about too much, but like sort of the X over the chest, like X over the heart, it's sort of like evocative of the heartless symbol, which is like has this big stitch X across the heart. But it's also like a black X, sort of darkness. So it sort of gives us that sort of the idea. It's like a visual foreshadowing that like Riku's heart is already leaning towards the darkness. He's already sort of been like sort of tempted by he's already leaning towards temptation of Heartless, which again, which I could admit is probably just me looking way too into things. Like I'm not 100% like maybe that was Nomura's intent because there's a lot of design details and stuff throughout the series that definitely does seem intentional and a lot of foreshadowing because like there is a lot of like small clues lingered throughout Kingdom Hearts that lead up to much bigger details. So this could have been intentional, but I don't know for certain, so I won't say if it was intentional or not. Anyway, I also like the part where I really like the part where we see at the beginning where Sora and Riku get into a race. Or racing track because it sort of gives us the idea that sort of this like rivaling competition aspect between Sora and Riku. Right now at the start of the game is this childish sort of innocent rivalry. But another thing that I find interesting is that during this race, Kairi is sort of like behind Riku and Sora. She's chasing after him, which is a recurring motif of Kairi's character, that she is oftentimes left behind by Sora and Riku, either because, like in Kingdom Hearts 1, it's because of sort of their rivalry, that their rivaling conflict with each other that causes her to be left behind. When later games, it's more like the two of them like pushing forward and being sort of like so the quest that they sometimes forget that Kai. I think it's more maybe not the. It's more the idea that Riku and Sora both are. They both on some level desire to protect Kairi. They sort of on some level. It's not. It's sort of like is where they want to protect her so much that they don't necessarily view her as an equal, so they unintentionally sort of leave her in the dust behind them because they're so focused on like keeping her safe, and that like is something that and that is definitely sort of like a source of I don't know if they flat out state that this upsets Kyrie, but like I've always seen it as like Kyrie is sort of on some level frustrated. She's always chasing after True, wanting to keep up, kind of like how Sora on some level was chasing after Riku. Kyrie's chasing after both of them, which I think is interesting. Um, I also I also really love how the first save point of Destiny Island is in the shack because like they're going in the later games. They retcon. It's like sort of revealed in Dark Road that shack was actually like the childhood home of Xehanort. So it's like there's this weird like it's just sort of this really cool idea that like the very first save point in the series is later revealed to be like the childhood home of the main antagonist for most of the series so far. It's like it's one of those like really cool retcons. Like yeah, it's probably been doing a bit too much or like over explaining stuff, like it feels less of an explanation, more like just like one of those cool little extra details, those sort of things that sort of like makes the world more connected. Um, Another thing I really like about like the first day of Destiny Islands is that like Riku is the one farthest away from everyone else. He's on the smaller part of the island, farther away. He's looking out into the ocean. He's not looking towards anyone. He's looking away. Sort of, it's a very cool visual indicator that that Riku's sort of obsession with leaving Destiny Islands and finding other worlds is overcoming his desire to be with his friends. The fact that he's prioritizing it over them and it's becoming an obsession that'll lead him down a darker path. They'll end up separating those from what really matters. So, the sort of idea that Riku is slow. We the beginning of Kingdom Hearts 1, we already see that Riku's like true ideals are decaying in favor of his more selfish and immature ambitions. Um, I also like how during the conversation at the end of the day where we see Sora, Kairi, and Riku all sort of hanging out on the tree, looking at the sunset. I really like the fact that Riku doesn't really know what he'll do once he reaches another world, because it's sort of a showcase that like Riku's desire to leave the islands, at least at this point in Kingdom Hearts 1, sort of like we see, it's a motivation derived from a childish desire to grow up faster. It's a very immature thing. It's like something a kid thinks he needs to do in order to be viewed as an adult by his peers. To sort of like to be that adult. He wants to grow up faster, but he's not thinking about what he'll actually do when he gets it. It's sort of a highlight about despite how the way Riku's acts, he's actually far more immature than he leads on because he is ultimately rooted in this like this childish desire to grow up faster than he actually can. Um, and it's also cool because it kind of showcases that Riku is, despite the fact that he tries to act as this cool older guy, is as immature, if not more immature, than Sora himself, who is this very childish, who's often portrayed as being very childish, whereas Riku's like sort of the cool older one, but it's like the fact that he doesn't even know what he'll do once he leaves the island, once he finds another world, sort of shows that he is, despite his facade, as immature as Sora, if not more so. And yeah, sorry, I'm getting a bit repetitive, but that's sort of like what you do when you're doing these off the cuffs, you're sort of talking about it. Yeah, and it's like it all sort of very much. It's very fitting for a character like Riku. He's very much that angsty teen. scene. And of course, this all has greater implications later with BB Birth by Sleep recontexting everything. I also like it's also very clear by the fact that like throughout most of the conversation, like Riku isn't actually looking towards Sora and Kairi. Throughout most of the conversation, he's looking away into the horizon, thinking about other worlds. Because it like not only like it's not only is it not a visual indication that Riku's desire to leave the islands is overcoming his desire to protect Sora and Kairi, but it's also very much showing that Riku is deeply dissatisfied with his current way of life. He's disconnected from it, and that he wants something bigger, he wants something greater, he wants something more important because he thinks himself as more important and special, which again makes a lot of sense for the concept of Birth by Sleep, why Riku would think he's more special, because in Kingdom Hearts 1 it's more like you get the impression that Riku sees himself as more special and important because again he's older, he's stronger, he appears more talented than Sora himself because like he's the top dog, he's the one who's always winning winning. So, but yeah, there's this element of Riku being sort of dissatisfied and wanting to leave the islands, which is like very cool with later games because this is a massive parallel between him and Xehanort, which I like. But yeah, other stuff about like the first day of Destiny Islands. I was able to beat Riku on my second try, which was really cool because like Riku, the fight against him is like one of those like really hard to win fights. This because like on the first playthrough, it takes you like so many tries to even beat him, you will oftentimes get up. And like is that's very much the intention. They want to make Riku this very tough and difficult opponent to fight. So to cement this idea that he is stronger than you and that he is stronger than Sora, making the later parts of the game more satisfying and more compelling. But on this playthrough, I was able to beat him on my second try, and of course, I saved beforehand so that I could get that. The score is now 1-0 time. But on one fight that took me a lot more tries and was difficult was the three-way fight between Waka, Tidus, and Selphie. Selphie. It's like it's just so difficult to sort of like deal with those three enemies at once, and like it's also kind of cool in retrospect because like in Kingdom Hearts 3 there is a bunch of during the end game section, during the Keyblade War section, there's a lot of boss fights where you fight multiple bosses at once, and it's like really cool how they're able to like this sort of element that like I doubt this was intentional, but this sort of element that was in the first game ended up showing again much later as a part of like the grand climax of the series overarching saga at this point. But yeah, it's all very cool. And it's like I really do like seeing these like younger versions of Tidus, Waka, and Selphie. Like they do a really good job of sort of integrating them as part of the world. That's the islands, and they did a really good job of making these like sort of younger, more immature versions of characters. Also, and back to the on the sunset scene, I really like how this scene is. It does. I really like how this takes place like as the sun is setting. As like I don't know if you just sun. I don't know if I don't know if it could be described as the twilight at that point. Like very much the sun sort of setting, and like it sells that sort of melancholic atmosphere to it, which is very much what the scene is going for. Really just help add that existential things. Um, okay, now to talk about the second day. One thing I like is that one thing I noticed that was interesting is that like on the second day we see Tidus like playing in the same spot Riku was on the first day, so it sort of gives me this impression. Sorry, to me, this implies that Tidus is on some level trying to imitate Riku in hope of being as strong as him, because he even mentions later that Riku was able to take all of them on no problem. Which is another way the game sort of like showing early on that Riku is like he is stronger and better than you to help set up this sort of like rivalry. Yes, very good. Um, I also kind of like the part where if you win the race, which I did multiple times because I just wanted to win it and I wanted to get the name of the sword, Excalibur. Riku will tell Sora to chill out if he wins. And it's like another good example of like Riku trying to present himself as more mature than he actually is. But I also kind of like it because like before the race starts, he says that the winner gets to eat a Paopu fruit with Kairi, which upsets Sora because like it's very evident that Sora has a crush on Kairi and wants to share the Paopu fruit with her. Like it's very obvious because the fact to do some is this sort of like romantic thing, this idea of chaining your destiny with someone forever. And so like the way I sort of interpret it is well, one could interpret it as hints that Riku also has feelings for Kairi, which I feel like in later games I don't know if I would agree with this sort of with this specific like love triangle interpretation, but with just Kingdom Hearts 1 itself in context, I could see someone coming to that conclusion. But I think the more interesting that we do is that Riku is intentionally, because like if you lose to Riku and talk to him, he'll mention that the thing with Kairi was the Powerpuff Fruit was just a joke. So I think the implication is that Riku is specifically trying to agitate Sora in order to make the competition more fun for himself. Sort of viewing that Riku doesn't take any of this the racing itself seriously, but he's more interested in like getting a rise out of Sora and like sort of competing with him, but not in the sense that he wants to be challenged, more in the sense that he wants Sora to be more fired up so that when he defeats him, it'll be more personally satisfying for him. Which, like, I know that probably sounds like I'm speaking poorly of Riku, but that's not really one of my intention. More so the idea that Riku's sort of like he's gotten used to position as the top dog, and that he is sort of like enjoying it a little bit too much than he should. I don't know. That's just sort of how I think about it. I have no idea if that's what I actually intended. Next is the cave part with Ansem, and like I gotta say, the part where Sora adds to the cave drawing that he and Kairi made as kids, like when he draws himself giving her the powerful fruit, is just like one of the cutest scenes in the series. And I get why they reference this so often because it's like one of the iconography that's like iconic to the series, but it's also very much just a perfect distillate. It's a perfect representation of sort of like the emotional core of the series, like just this idea of wanting of caring for someone so much that you want to forever be connected to them. This idea that no matter what happens, your hearts will always be bonded, no matter how far apart you are from each other. It's a very good representation of that deal. Um, I really like Ansem's interaction with Sora in the cave because it's a, probably our first showcase of a characteristic that is recurring through not just the different Xehanort incarnations, but is central to Xehanort's character as a whole. This sort of his whole line of one who knows nothing can understand nothing. The fact that he scoffs at the idea that Sora can like change and learn more as he leaves the islands and improves, because like Xehanort himself is inherently a cynical person, distrustful of others, who believes people are incapable of truly bettering themselves and being good. He thinks the worst of everyone that isn't himself, and so he scoffs at the idea that Sora could grow and improve and become a better person. But it's also the idea that he doesn't think Sora could ever understand the world better than him. Because, like, we later learned that Ansem has been on Destiny Islands for a while now. He's been on there for decades, and he's probably been watching Sora and Riku grow up. And so we already get this. This scene sort of implies that Ansem has already come up with a. He's already come up with a negative view of Sora, that he sort of views him as this. So Xehanort later describes Sora as dull and ordinary, but I think at this point, Ansem himself specifically sees Sora as this immature child incapable of growing and changing. But he doesn't think Sora can like, because Xehanort, we later find out, also was from Destiny Islands and left and saw the world. But of course, he came to a much worse conclusion about them, that everybody was bad and wicked on the inside. So in this sort of like scene, Sora, he is doubting that Sora will be able to like grow like he did. I think in part because he knows that Sora will never come to the negative views as him, so he doesn't believe that anything Sora can understand will be of worth. So that's why he sort of says, "One who knows nothing can understand nothing." He doesn't. Thinks Sora is inherently ignorant because of his optimism, and that no matter what he goes, no matter what he sees, he will never change or learn better because he doesn't believe Sora will have the same mindset as him. So again, it's sort of like this distillation of the fact that Xehanort himself doesn't trust anybody but himself. He has no faith in other people. Okay, let's see. What's the next point? Uh, sorry, kind of. Okay, never mind. Got it. Sorry for all the bleh. I just need to check my notes because I've got a lot of them and they're very helpful with this stuff. The scene between like Sora and Kairi at the end of day two, I really like because I sort of get the impression that like Kairi is my takeaway from the scene is that Kairi is afraid of change. That like she even tells Sora never to change, and sort of the implication that Kairi on some level, I feel like Kairi doesn't really want to leave the islands, that she doesn't want her life to change, that she likes it for the way it is, but she's only going along with it, both in part because like again, she and Sora sort of follow Riku along all the time. But I also get the impression that she's doing this because she wants to stay by Sora's side, that her motivation is less about discovering her old home and more so that she wants to stay with Sora no matter what happens. And I think that's also why she like says she offers for her and Sora to just go by themselves, just the two of them. Sort of this highlighting that Kairi's true desires for going along is that she wants to stay by Sora's side no matter what. Um, Yeah. I also think it's like pretty evident by the fact that like one, it was Riku's idea to leave the island, and the fact that Sora and Kairi are very much present like tag-alongs. They sort of like follow Riku's lead and do whatever they want. It very much seems like Riku is the one who wants to leave the islands more than anything, and Sora and Kairi are going along because it's what Riku wants, and they think, Riku's cool and awesome, and they should just do what he says. And not that they don't have other reasons. Like it's very clear that Sora himself is a very curious person who wants to learn more about it. But I think it's clear during the conversation we saw during day one when Riku has all these existential thoughts and Sora just says this sort of like more childish, more like the fact it's like clear that Sora hasn't thought about this as much as Riku has thought about it. So it makes it very clear that like Sora is in part going along with this because it's Riku's idea and Riku's the leader, at least for the group at this point. Um, shoot, last track attacks. Hang on. Oh yeah, so one thing I like about like the storm scene, like where like the Heartless invade Destiny Islands, is like even though they never say in Kane Sworn One, it's very clear by Riku's actions and words in this scene that he is the one who like lit the Heartless in. He's the one who's like letting the darkness consume his homeworld because he believes that's what will allow him to leave the world. And I think it's also probably implied that he got this idea from Ansem, like I think, because like in Recoded, we see a scene like after destruction of Destiny Island where Ansem orders a portal, a corridor of darkness for Riku to leave. I definitely get, and the fact that Riku's Ansem was looking for the door, and it's like it's very implied that like only somebody with a key, only I don't know if they flat state, but I've sort of always got the implication that only like a Keyblade wielder could open the door in the cave, because like the door itself we see in the Cave of Destiny Island is like the door to Destiny Island's heart, and by opening that door, not only does this world become open to the heartless, but it also like it opens the heart up so that the heartless can consume Destiny on Darkness. So I always got the implication that like Ansem was the one who instructed Riku to do this so that Riku could leave his home world. But yeah, I also like I really love the part where Riku offers his hand to Sora because like it ties direct because he does the same thing in the opening, meaning the opening was foreshadowing this moment because like in the opening we see like Riku, he's standing in the ocean, a tsunami, a wave is about to consume him. He stares at Sora, offers his hand to him. They both get plunged into the water. Sora is drowning, but Riku looks unfazed, just continuing to offer his hand out. Like it makes it very clear that the opening was foreshadowing Riku himself falling to the darkness. The fact that his lust for power ends up consuming him, his own selfish desires become more important than his willingness to protect his friends. As we see, like Sora himself, he's like drowning. He's having trouble breathing in the water, whereas Riku seems unfazed. This idea that his his own desire power has overwhelmed his desire to protect Sora, which again I think is like really interesting. And I really like how the opening foreshadows that, and I really love the recurring because they use that image a lot with in other OPs with other characters of Riku offering his hand to Sora. It's like one of those like just perfect imagery. Um, and let's see, I already talked about how like it was clear that like by that Riku was the one who lit the Heartless swords. Um, yeah, the second fight with the Dark Side Heartless is again is pretty cool. I think that he definitely seems to have more health than in the first fight, so it goes on longer. But yeah, I think it's cool because like in the first fight we don't really see Sora defeat the Dark Side Heartless, but this time we get to see Sora like the Jimmy's Cricket confirms that Sora was able to defeat Darkseid, so now we get like a real fight where we get to finish him. It was cool. But what I love about this is I love the one thing I've always loved about Kingdom Hearts boss fights is the slow mo effect when you deal the final boss where everything just sort of down. It's just like so exciting and satisfying. Makes it's like perfect. Um Lastly, since we're at the end of Disney Islands, I want to talk about sort of what I think this world ultimately represents because I feel like a lot of the different a lot of the worlds in Cage, specifically the original worlds, all have their sort of specific symbolism. And Destiny Islands, I believe, is a world besides. I already mentioned the connection, how it sort of represents like Sora, Kairi, and Riku living in harmony because it's a world made of land, sea, and sky, all like in coexisting together in peace. But I also think another way to view Destiny Islands is that it sort of represents childhood. It's like when we see the world, it's like from we only see like the island the kids play at, but like again, we see a lot of these like construct. We see a lot of these like man-made wood constructs that very much look. They kind of look like something you would see in, like Conan Kid Next Door or Ed and Eddie, just like a bunch of cobbled together wood that looks so sort of messy and like kid drawing. Like the island itself is decorated with these things, both in like in the tree houses or in the race obstacle course. just sort of like everything about the island itself looks like stuff that would be made by a child. Like it looks like a children's playground. And even the parts that aren't like even the wooden parts that aren't made clearly made by the kids, the tropical island itself, it's sort of like again, it's like this small beach. It's not like a beach you see in real life where you expect a bunch of other people to flock to and like a bunch of people and like to be like yeah. Sorry, mumbling trying to again. Sorry, okay, but yeah. It's it's not the type of beach you see in real life where you see a bunch of people pondering and doing stuff. It's like a small, almost dioramic beach. Like it's like a playground for kids, sort of like the beach version of a playground for kids. That's sort of how it works. In the island stuff, there's just so much about it. The fact that we don't see any adults, it's only the kids. The fact that that everything we see there, all the man-made stuff seems to be stuff made by children. The fact that it's like a playground, it's very much a world that represents childhood, and I think it's very fitting because it's like not only is it the home of our main characters, but it's also like the it's sort of like one of those places of refuge for the characters. So and it's some place Sora himself is like constantly wanting to return to throughout Cage. Sort of this idea of like the characters being stripped away from their childhood by the incurring threats and them constantly like wanting to go back to it, even if a part of them even if like there's always that chance that they won't be able to go back. So yeah, it's really cool. I really like that sort of symbolism. Anyway, now that Destiny Islands is done, we'll talk about Traverse Town. Okay, so first off, first thing about Traverse Town that I kind of like is the fact that like one of the first Disney characters to greet Sora is Pluto. Like he's the one who sort of wakes Sora up and sort of like makes Sora realize that he really is in our world, it's not just a dream. And I find that interesting because like it's another way that the game sort of like draws parallels between Sora and Mickey because like Pluto is Mickey's loyal companion and dog. So having Pluto be the one to wake Sora up, I think is like a very way to like further cement those parallels. Also, people probably will point this out, but like that scene is actually foreshadowed in the cave drawings on Destiny Islands because if you look, you can see a cave drawing of Pluto licking Sora, which is a nice, cute little detail. Um, Another thing that I thought was very interesting is that the Traverse Town theme doesn't play until Sora realizes he's in another world. So it's sort of like the game, like it's the game using the music to sort of symbolically show that Sora has now become a part of Traverse Town. Because like beforehand, when because you walk around, there's no music; it's just dead silence. So there's this level of disconnect. It's sort of a way of making the player feel the same disconnect as Sora is being in this strange new world. But then the music kicks in, and then bam, once Sora makes that realization that he is now entered in our world. So sort of the music sort of like kicking in to show us that like we the player and Sora have now become a part of this world, this new world, which is really good. Uh, Next up, I really sort of like the interaction between Sora and Sid and in the shop because not only does it sort of show that like because Sid's characterized in the Kingdom Hearts series is like this very grouchy but also like fatherly type figure. He's sort of like the grouchy dad figure, which I really like because I think that at least like some good comedy, but also like some very sweet interactions between him and the other characters. Not 100% if that's accurate to his characterization in Final Fantasy VII because I haven't played it yet, but like it's definitely one of those things that makes me interested more in Sid. But what I really like about this interaction is it kind of shows that Sora has this sort of disregard to authority or this need to because the way he's talking to Sid is sort of like in a way that's disrespectful, not in a way in which he's technically trying to disrespect him, but the way that Sora doesn't really have like that idea of like that idea of that need to like treat older people specifically in a super overly polite and overtly respectful way. And I don't think it's necessarily sure that Sora has a problem with authority, but it's more so the fact that, like Sora is this sort of like he's this kid who he's a person who never feels the need to wear a mask in front of people. He's always acting people in a way that's 100% genuine, which also comes in the way in which he doesn't sort of address people in a way that's sort of like 100% considered like cultural in a way, which also causes conflict between him and like older characters. Because Sid himself is like kind of upset that Sora isn't talking to him in the over respectful manner, which causes him to talk down to Sora, which Sora himself also takes offense to. Which I don't know. I just think I'm probably looking too much into it, but I think it's a very interesting moment. Um, I really like sort of how the game does this thing, how it keeps Squall's identity secret, but still hints at him. Because like in the Kingdom Hearts series, Squall goes by the name Leon. It's explained in the journal. They did it out of guilt over the fact that he couldn't save his world, which is a bit silly because like chronically wise he should have been like a kid when it happened, but also that's the kind of decision a kid would make, and it's sort of like because I haven't finished Final Fantasy VIII, but I played so far, and Squall very much is that very sort of angsty, overly introspectful kid, like he's that type of person who's like constantly puts up a front tie the fact that they are anxious and constantly overthinking things. Like he's very moody, sort of depressed, and sort of like I feel like it fits Squall's character to have him like end up being so guilty about something that isn't his fault that he ends up renouncing his name out of shame for it, which I like. But I do like how the specific name they choose, like because like story wise, that's sort of reason, but the out of universe reason why they changed the name is because they wanted to keep his identity secret, so that when he does see him, it becomes like it's a surprise. It's like a treat for the fans. But I really like how they choose the name Leon because Squall's last name is Leonhart. So by making it Leon, it hints to the character being Squall without Flower saying it. So if you're not familiar with Final Fantasy VIII, you wouldn't know who that was. But if you are, you already start to suspect. It's like a cool little detail. Um, I also like how at the back of Leon's jacket you see the symbol for Renoa's wings, which sort of hints to the fact that she exists in Kingdom Hearts without saying it. Because like if you're familiar with the series, you know what those wings are. You know they're a symbol of Renoa, and like I think Kingdom Hearts 2 also sort of um Claire sort of cements the fact that she does in fact exist in this world, even if we don't see her, because Swell gets a letter from her in the end credits. So one thing that I really love about the fight with Squall, I mean Leon, I mean bleh, whatever, is sort of his fighting stance, like with his hand in his pocket, him carrying the gunplate over his shoulder, or relax. It very much makes him look indifferent, which I think is a good way of like visually letting the player know that Leon is another level ahead of Sora. Sort of this know that he's like that he's a more difficult opponent, which I think works well because like one, this is a fight in which if you lose still goes on. And I feel like Sora losing is probably the can answer, but even if you win the fight, Sora ends up passing out and it's revealed that Leon was holding back a bit. Which again is sort of a very good way of showing that Sora still has a long ways to go and that we're not exactly in Leon's league. Showing us the heights we can go for it. I really love Aerith's Kingdom Hearts 1 design. I don't know, something about it's just super cute. Super pretty, super cute. Wish I had an outfit like that, honestly. Okay. And I also another interesting note is that when Sora wakes up from his sleep after his fight with Leon, he sees Kairi again, and of course, like it's not really her. It's it's Yuffie, Sora's her having an hallucination, probably because he still got Kairi's heart in him. But again, it's like presenting this idea that like when Sora wakes up, the first person he sees is Kairi. Like they're making this a recurring image, which I think is really cool. Um, I really like the Soldier Heartless because they're like a very cool way of showing progression and strength for the Heartless because they look like the Shadow Heartless, but slightly bulkier, taller, and now they got armor. So it's sort of giving us this progression of like of Heartless hierarchy and and sort of like showing us that like the enemies are getting tougher. Like very cool. It's very simple. I'm probably giving too much credit for saying overly simple, but like screw it. I like giving praise to those cute little details. And I also think it's really cool that they show the soldier Heartless now because like they're basically working for the guard Heartless that which is the boss of Traverse Town. So it's basically and they fit aesthetically with the guard Heartless. You know the idea of armor. So it's like a very good like very visual synergy and all that stuff. Very good. Um, I really love the guard armor boss fight because it's basically a mirror to Sword, Donald, and Goofy, where the boss itself is also a trio, like because it's like split up into three parts. There's like the arms, the legs, and then the torso and head. Like this, so there's this parallel of Trinity versus Trinity, but the difference is like with Sword, Donald, and Goofy, they are three individuals working together in it to achieve a unity. Whereas guard heartless the guard armor heartless it's like it's not truly three individuals, it's just like a single entity that's split in three parts, so there's no true teamwork, no true unity, no true friendship. Whereas sword, which is why Sword and Donald Goop are able to defeat it despite it at first seeing like it's in greater synergy, because like it seems a little more organized. Like this is just a ragtag trio that are just starting to work together, but they are able to form a real connection. Whereas the guard heartless is there is no true bond, there is no true relationship. So its Trinity is in the end weaker, despite being more, despite being like despite appearing more powerful than Sora, Donald, and Goofy than the Half Pint Trio, it is a inferior. Their unity is a I'm sorry, but it's like it's not a true trinity. It's not a true trio, so that's why it loses to the game. Um, I really love the part where Donald and Goofy tell Sora that they can't make where to stop frowning and just big smiling instead. Now, the plot reasons because their ship runs on smiles, but it's also Sora, Donald, and it's also Goofy and Donald trying to encourage Sora and cheer him up because they can clearly tell he's depressed. But it's like it's another important thing because like this is an ideal. This idea of like not this Donald and Goofy, like their ideals, the sort of things with their recurring characters. This idea of like there's no time to be sad when work needs to be done. Well, not necessarily like it's more like you can't just wallow around in misery. You have to get up and you have to face the challenges. You got to do your duty, and you should walk forward with a smile on your face. Which is like a major recurring theme with Sora's character later on. Like this is not an ideal of Donald and Goofy that they impart on Sora that remains with his character for the rest of the series. Because like there are definitely instances later on of Sora sort of putting on a brave happy face to mask his inner turmoil because he's got to help people. He's got to do the right thing and he's got to keep pushing forward. And that's sort of something that Donald and Goofy teach Sora, which is why I think they're like why the Half Pint Trio is such a pivotal part of Kingdom Hearts' story and also for Sora's character. I also like how like Sora's first spell is he gets it from Donald, he gets fire from Donald, and then he gets dodge roll from Goofy because like Donald is supposed to be like the Black Mage. He's the magician character. His stats are all put in magic. So of course it's fitting that he's the one to teach Sora his first spell. And I also like that Goofy gives Sora dodge roll because it's defensibility. Goofy is all about defense, all about protecting. So sort of this idea of like it's a really cool way of using the gameplay to show this idea that Sora himself becomes stronger thanks to the bonds he forms, but it's also the idea that like with each bond he makes, he sort of takes he's not just receiving power from them, he's receiving their specific powers, their specific ideals and traits, and sort of like becoming one with himself, becoming stronger, not just by making more friends, but learning to understand people and accept them as a part of himself. His heart is ultimately growing, not just because of the connection he makes, but because he makes their hearts truly a part of his own in that way. And just like again, it's really good. Like I'm probably overpraising small details, but like I really like stuff like this. Like using gameplay elements to showcase the series themes. Because that's something I think Kingdom Hearts is always really effective at is that it makes every aspect of the game like an extension of the series core themes, which is really good. Um, so one thing I noticed about Traverse Town, interesting, that I don't think I noticed, is that there's a lot of Disney iconography. Like there's the picture of like Lady and Tramp. There's also a store that's like supposed that like has the Mad Hatter on it, and like that does seem a bit weird because like these characters, like the Mad Hatter, already exists in Wonderland, and we never see Lady and Tramp in Traverse Town. So sort of where did this world get these iconography of these characters exist in another place? So I sort of have a theory, yeah, that's my own more of like a headcanon that like Travis Channel itself specifically like modeled its shape and form after other worlds in order to make itself more accommodating to those that have lost their world. Again, sort of a headcanon and stuff. I forget. I think there are like data books and stuff that go into sort of like the lore of Travis Channel, but basically it's like it is a sanctuary for those that lost their world who are made from the remains of what's left of them, yeah, which is interesting. I really love that Leon he's a bit of a tsundere in the game because like one of the main collectibles in the game is like the Dalmatians from Wonder Woman Dalmatians, because like the puppies have all gone missing, so you got to find them throughout the scattered worlds. And like I really like this because like one is sort of making a collectible, just it's not just like making the collectible a random object, but it's making the collectible very personalized by making it like an actual character you got to help, but also making it feel like it's part of the world and part of the story. So it's not just like the stars in Mario, in which they're like these, like in Mario 64, where they're these vague. I mean, like they do have a purpose, a story purpose. They feel a bit more. They feel less personalized. And here, you're specifically rescuing these animals in order to reunite them with their loved ones. So like it's more emotional. And it feels like it's more part of the world, which is like very nice. But also like how like Leon is the one who asks Sora to find them, sort of showing that Leon himself is like very emotionally invested in making sure these puppies are okay, which is like it's not just cute, but it's also showing the fact that like Leon is a much bigger softie than he leads on, which is like is also apparent in Final Fantasy VIII too. So again, very strong characterization, very good use of gameplay mechanics to sort of flesh out the characters in the story, which again I like that. And I also the Trinity is another one of my favorite collectibles in games because like again, it's sort of taking that theme of friendship, of connections, of the trio, like Sora, Donald, and Goofy, and like making these collectibles like this idea that like their very bonds are integral to the gameplay itself, and it sort of like helps them sort of become stronger. Like because you unlock the ability to complete more Trinity marks as the game progresses, as their bonds go stronger together. So like again, really cool aspect of the game, sort of like you using the gameplay and stories and characterization and harmony. Next up we have Wonderland, which is probably one of my least favorite Disney World, just because like it is a very frustrating world to go through on a first playthrough because there's a lot of stuff that the game itself doesn't explain all that well. So there's a lot of guessing and there's a lot of confusion about what you're supposed to do, so you can easily get lost or get stuck. But um, but it's a lot easier on the second playthrough because then you kind of know everything you got to do. And I do think there are interesting parts 'cause, like there's a lot of hidden collectibles in the game that you can't get until you come back later, which is nice. But another note that I sort of like about Wonderland is I really like that this is the world in which the Nocturne Heartless are introduced, which are like a staple throughout the series. They're basically like the magic based Heartless, and I like that they're introduced in Wonderland because they very much aesthetically fit the world really well. It's not like say it's not specifically like other Heartless where you can tell they're specifically dying for this specific world and wine more than anything because they are like one of the most recurring Heartless in the series. They are like in almost every world, but like their design aesthetic probably I think fits Wonderland best out of all the other worlds. So I really like that they're introduced here, especially because Wonderland sort of the world that sort of like pushes us more into like because like it's the first world we go to where we have magic, so it's fitting that we have magic based enemies that are easy to deal with more damage. But also because like again, it's another world in which we learn Blizzard, we learn another spell. So again, though, it's probably the world that sort of pushes us to use magic the most in the beginning. So it's I really like that's where we get introduced to them, and then um, I I love the courtroom scene in Wonderland because I feel like it's the very first showcase of one of Sora's more prominent traits, and that's that Sora will always try to save people regardless of the rules or the consequences he has to face. Because in this, like Donald and Goofy tell Sora he can't interfere with it because that goes against the rules, but then Sora himself just disregards it immediately as he sees Alice in trouble, as long as right as he sees something going wrong, where somebody needs to be protected. Sora says, "Screw the rules," and does whatever he can to help someone. Sora is somebody who, and that sort of inspires Donald and Goofy to like break the rules as well and help Sora, which I like. It's so good. It's a really good way of like showing how Sora connects with Donald and Goofy and how they sort of become closer to him, but also shows a way that Sora is able to like challenge the creatures around him. Because like that's something what Sora does a lot, in the series that he sort of challenges a lot of the preconception rules of the series by who he is. Because Sora himself is like, as we get on later on, he's not a conventional Keyblade wielder. He's not someone special. He's as one character looks out, specifically dull and ordinary, but specifically because Sora is dull and ordinary and is able to do all these fantastic things to challenge the system, and it sort of on some way makes him a true hero, which I really like. Yeah, the courtroom scene is so good because like this is something that shows up with Sora repeatedly throughout the series. He repeatedly screws the rules, and he goes face first into helping somebody. He doesn't care about the consequences he's going to face. He not cares about how he's going to be punished or how it's going to affect him. If he sees somebody in trouble, he's going to help them. Damn anything else. And I love that about Sora's character. I love characters that don't just stand by and stick to the rules or the system that they know they're wrong, because at the end of the day, saving people is what's most important to them. And I love that. Um, Also, like on this play, this is probably the first time which I selected the wrong piece of evidence during the courtroom scene. So Donald and Goofy end up being trapped, which like made things probably a little bit harder than I remember, but not too hard. I also found out later when watching somebody else play the game that you can actually break the cage and free Donald and Goofy, which is like really fun. Fun. Um, Next up, I also like how that in order for the Wonderland boss to show up, you need to turn on the lights in the bizarre room, so that way the shadows themselves go stronger. Because like again, it's a callback to the line at the beginning of the game. Like the closer you are to the light, the stronger your shadow gets. So it's the idea that by turning on all the lights in the room, that makes the shadows themselves go bigger, allowing the boss to show up for you to fight. And also, I gotta say, the Wonderland boss fight is without a doubt my least favorite boss in Kingdom Hearts, just because it's like it's so it's a very frustrating thing to fight because in order to hit it, its hit point is like up on its body. So in order to get you got to climb up onto the table, jump and hit it. So it makes it a lot more difficult to hit the enemy. And while there are stuff you can do to stop it, like you can use your you can use the blizzard magic to like turn out the fire on its wand, or you can although stun it certain times. It's a lot more frustrating than it should be. And I remember in the first playthrough, I got stuck on this boss fight and it ended up like taking me forever to get through. It's just like super frustrating, and the fact that it's a recurring boss also makes it worse because every time it shows up again, it's just like so bleh. But yeah, um, and I think it probably would be less bad if it didn't have the ability to knock down the table and chair, because then you just spend so much of it waiting, running around, dodging. So it ends up feeling the boss feels more like a time waste than like an actually engaging fight. But yeah, um, also I really love how the first keyhole that Sora like closes in the series with the Keyblade is inside a literal sentient doorknob, making the keyhole itself literal. And it's like it's just one of those very cool and clever things. Really cool. Okay, Wonderland is done. Next up is to talk about Olympus Coliseum. Olympus Coliseum is probably one of my favorite recurring worlds in Kingdom Hearts, and it's sort of the big reason why I came to love Disney's Hercules movie. Because I remember as a kid, the movie, for some reason, I always wanted to avoid it. Something about it look just bugged me as a kid. But after playing Kingdom Hearts, I really got invested in the characters, and it made me want to watch the movie, and it quickly became like my favorite Disney movie. Which makes sense because I love superheroes, and Disney's Hercules is basically like a Superman movie, but with Hercules, and it's like, actually, tangent. That I'm going to tangent. It's not about the movie. We're talking about Kingdom Hearts, but yeah, I love the Olympus Coliseum world, and I really love its sort of theme and place in the story as a world in which Sora, Donald, and Goofy learn what it means to be truly heroes and prove themselves. But it's also a world, especially in Kingdom Hearts One, that helps Sora grow closer to Donald and Goofy and sort of come to realize what the power of friendship is. But I'll get into that more. But yeah, I love the interaction between Phil at the beginning of the game where he mistakes you for for Hercules and asks you to move the block, but you can't move the block because it's too heavy. But I also love how the game places like how there's like a golden trinity mark there, letting you know that basically the game telling you that you'll be able to move this later in the future once you unlock that the golden trinity mark ability. And when we get to that, it's such a good payoff. But yeah, I really like the Phil is rich and very well. He's very funny. Also, saying else I noticed well in the Hercules world, specifically about the Dalmatians, is that when you find them, they usually come in like pairs of threes. So like even the Dalmatians themselves have a sort of like trio or trinity thing going on with them. Though I don't know, maybe there are later chests, and I've just forgotten that where you don't get three Dalmatians. But I don't know. I could just be wrong, but I don't know. I thought it was a cool detail. Now then, another part of the Olympus world I love so much is Cloud's design in Kingdom Hearts 1. Like, it's my favorite design for the character. It just looks so cool, and I think it's a really good way of like showing that this version of Cloud is on a darker path than the version of Cloud you're familiar with. It's very much of a striking visual indicator that he's a sort of intimidating presence. Like, yeah, but like it is so cool how with Kingdom Hearts 1 they introduce Cloud as an antagonist. Like he doesn't exactly seem like it's not just his design, it's the way the story like introduces him as working for Hades and as an opponent you have to take down. Really just sets the fact that he's an antagonist. But there's also hints for people who are more familiar character of his true heroic nature. And I really like how they use Cloud in this world because there's this element of because Cloud in Kingdom Hearts 1 he's been tempted by the darkness, he's on a darker road than he should be, but through his interactions with Sora and Hercules his more heroic nature gets revealed, which is what keeps him from completely falling down the dark path. And that's why I kind of prefer like Sora losing to Cloud in the fight, because like having Cloud spare Sora due to and like that being the reason why Hades double crossed him, I think is a lot better because like it shows that like despite it all, Cloud is at his core a good person who wouldn't hurt a kid like Sora. So having him choose to spare him and having that be the reason why Hades double crossed him, I think is a lot better. The idea that like in the end Cloud couldn't be the bad guy that he thought he was willing to be. That Cloud is a good person. That's why I proved it. And I also love that Hercules, his first, we hear about him at the beginning of the world, that he's this powerful hero, but we don't see him yet. And then the first time we see him in the game, he's saving our butts from Cerberus. Like having to show up at the last minute, not just saving Cloud, but protecting the Half Pint Trio. It's like a perfect way of not just letting us know everything about Hercules in a quick second, but it's very much showing us that like this is what a hero is. This is the hero that the Half Pint Trio needs to aspire to. It's very much a goal for Sora and also for the player themselves too. And that's why I sort of love the world of Olympus Coliseum Kingdom Hearts 1 because like I've already mentioned before, it's a world about heroism, but it's a world in which Sora, Donald, and Goofy kind of like learn about what it means to be heroes, despite because like they think Donald Goofy already said that Sora's a hero because he was chosen by the Keyblade, but that isn't enough. Like the fact that well Phil doesn't see it as a big deal because he doesn't know jack shit about the Keyblade, so of course he wouldn't think of a deal. But there's also the idea of like just because you're chosen by the thing doesn't mean enough. You have to like a true hero. It's not just about fighting. It's about having the heart to protect people, the strength to like strike to put out your neck in line for other people, and the fact to keep going, to keep pushing, to move forward. And I love how like Cloud is sort of a contrast. He is this person who is at his core heroic, but is like abandoning that true heroism and trying to fulfill the role of the villain because he's walking on this darker path, thinking it's what he needs to get to achieve his goals. But it's not the right path. The fact his interactions with Sora and Hercules prove to him and show him that this isn't who he truly is, and in order to get what he wants, in order to be the person he truly wants to be, he has to be true to himself. He has to be true to his heroic nature and not give in to the temptation of darkness. And I really love that. And I also like how this world, like, it ends with Sora, Donald, and Goofy becoming junior heroes. So showing that they are on the path to becoming true heroes, but they're not quite there yet. That they still got more to learn. It's a very good thing they do in the first game, and there's a really great payoff to this in Kingdom Hearts 2 and 3. And I also like how the Olympus Coliseum is a world you go back to multiple times throughout the game to like, because it's a tournament, so there's a bunch of different fights you got to do, and there are these fights as we see later on in the game that sort of help Sora come to understand what exactly the power of friendship is. And yes, it's just really good stuff. A lot of really good themes, and I don't think a lot of people really talk about how much prevalent the theme of heroism is to the world of Olympus, and how much it has an impact on Sora, Donald, and Goofy. How it helps them become the great heroes they are in later games. Um, I also really like the mention of like Hercules mentioning that like he wore Cerberus down before Sora fight because again it's another way the game's showing that Sora is like he's still got a long way to go. He's still got more to do to become a true hero. Again, more stuff. I also love how Cloud is the one who gives Sonic Sora the Sonic Blade. I don't know why I said Sonic by mistake because they both start with S's. Because again, it's another way the game like using gameplay mechanics to sort of like inform us about the theme of friendship. The idea of, like with every new bond Sora forms, the stronger he gets. Really cool stuff. All right, after Olympus Coliseum, we have Deep Jungle, which is the Tarzan world, and probably not counting like Atlantis and stuff like that, my least favorite Disney World in the series. And like to do that, it's just like it is so frustrating to play on a first playthrough because like Deep Jungle is a world in which it doesn't exactly spell out what you need to do, and there's just so much backtracking. There's a lot of elements of like you need to go here, you need to go here. You end up going back to all these different areas again. A lot of just so much backtracking because then it's like we got to go back to all the previous areas to save all the gorillas, and then you have to go back to the tent and then leave the tent to get the next cutscene to know what to do, and it just sort of repeats a lot, and it's very frustrating to deal with. And the game, I don't think it does a good enough job at telling you know what you need to do. It also doesn't help that like when I first played Deep Jungle, this world gave me massive motion sickness. I don't know why, but whenever I play Deep Jungle, I just feel sick playing it. Maybe it's because there's too much greens and yellows. I don't know. But yeah, even though I think Deep Jungle is a very frustrating world to play through, especially on a first playthrough, one element of gameplay wise that I really like is the part where you like swing, where you're like sliding down the vines. Like I don't know, something about that's just really cool. It's really fun. But one of the first things I like about this world is like it's the first world in which you get a Disney World party member, and it's after you lose Donald and Goofy. So again, it's like a really clever way of doing it. But like I think the most interesting part about the story of Deep Jungle is Clayton, because he's the first instance we see in the series of an antagonist who like puts on the false bravado of a civilized man, of someone of power, to hide their true greedy, selfish nature. But in the end, they will always act upon that nature because they have at their core given into the temptation and darkness. They have ignored the light within their hearts. They're choosing to give into the darkness. And we see that as Clayton, when he doesn't get what he wants, he eventually like joins forces with the Heartless, which have become entranced to the darkness with his art. And once he works with them, he thinks himself as their master, as the one controlling them. Like, because like during his boss fight with the Chameleon Heartless, if when the Chameleon Heartless is like stunned or knocked down, you see Clayton like bashing and hitting on it because he thinks he's the one in charge. He thinks he's the figure of true power. But in reality, as we see toward the end of the world, the Heartless were just using Clayton. All they wanted was his heart. They were lured in by the darkness of their heart, and they wished to consume it. Clayton thought he was the master, but in reality, he was nothing more than the Heartless's prey. And like that's really good. They spell it out later with like Maleficent and the other villains talking about it. But like it's this really good showcase of like how people who like use the darkness, how they like they give in to their selfish and greedy desires. Then in the end, that the darkness itself simply put manipulates them and will bring about their own downfall. It's also a good showcase of the fact that like the Heartless, even though they work for these villains, like they're not truly loyal. Okay, the only thing they truly care about, the only, well, the only okay, sorry, let me phrase this again. The only thing that they are truly loyal to is their nature to consume and corrupt. And so they never work with these villains with the intention of being loyal. They are only working with them so that they can one day take their hearts and consume them. The villains rely on power in order to control and keep the heartless at bay, but that control is only a falsehood. It's only an illusion that the heartless use so that they can take what they want. It's like it's a really good stuff. We get more of this later in the game. It's real. There's a payoff to this towards the end that's like so good that I'll talk about later. But yeah, another part I like about Deep Jungle is like towards the end is the cave section, the waterfall cave part. Because like Deep Jungle is a world popular mainly with greens and yellows. There's a lot of like that is a very green and yellow world, and there's a lot of like the colors and stuff. But once you get to the cave, it's like it's a nice, cool, refreshing blue. After playing so much of this level and like seeing bright or like almost irritating greens and yellows and sometimes dull yellow greens, not dull yellows, dull greens. You are greeted with a area that's like populated with nice, cool, refreshing blue. So it's like very much it feels like a reward to the player after going through this world to like get something nice and calming. And it also helps that like this part of the level is filled with a bunch of treasure chests with a lot of really good items. So another place of like, the game itself is very much intentionally rewarding you for like getting through the world, and it's a very nice payoff. It's something I didn't notice until this playthrough. It's very nice. I also like how like after this world you unlock the Red Trinity because a part of the story in this of Deep Jungle is like Sora. He and Donald had a fight and now they're going distance, and so like there's this unwillingness to like Sora is unwilling to truly admit that Donald and Goofy have become his friends, as shown in the beginning of the world where he first asks Tarzan where they are, but then he switches to Kairi and Riku because he's mad at Donald and he's under the impression that their friendship isn't quite a true one. Because like at the beginning of the game, it does kind of come across like Donald and Goofy are using Sora to find the king because Donald himself mentions it when he promises that they'll help Sora find his friends. He admits to Goofy that he doesn't know if they actually can find Sora's friends in the worlds, but he needs to do something to keep Sora with them so that they can find the king. But yeah, I think like what the Deep Jungle really does is it starts with them having this fight and the separation because of these like these conflicts, but it also shows apparently that despite it all, that they have truly become friends and that they want to stay together. And that's why I like how this world ends with you getting the Red Trinity mark. It's sort of like another gameplay way of like showing us that the Half Pint Trio has become stronger thanks to these endeavors, that they've gone past their differences and that they become like an even greater friendship. It's like really cool stuff. And that will be it for the podcast. Um, for the next episode, it'll probably be Agrabah to shoot. I don't know. We'll start with Agrabah probably, but I'm not entirely sure when we'll get to the end part. Maybe it'll be Agrabah until like Peter Pan. Maybe I don't know. Promises depending on like how much further I'm able to get throughout the game will be the next place. But listen, we did like basically like four, one, two, three, four, five. Yeah, like five worlds this time. So maybe we'll try five worlds for the next episode, and hopefully the third episode can be just like endgame stuff. Anyway, thank you so much for listening to my podcast, and I hope you're here for the next one. Bye, everyone, and I hope you have a fantastic day.